There's some great tools that I can suggest to you if you're interested in that, but it's a good way and a way that bears fruit often. You will find that in that space, people who have had religious trauma, who have been hurt by the church, will be active in conversation and sometimes call Christians on the carpet in the ways that we should be. And other times you have a chance to respond to that in love and grace. I'm going through these quickly because I would like you guys to get lunch at some point. And I will probably dive into a couple of these next week as well. Visitation. Visitation used to be one of the major modes of discipleship. You would, before the internet and phones and all of that stuff, the only way you talked with people was you walked to their door, knocked on it, and said, hey, can we sit on the porch, have a glass of tea, and talk? That was a mode of discipleship. Now today it's been turned into more of door-to-door evangelism salesmen, where people go and knock on the door, and you can see inside as people kind of like, they didn't see me? Why are they at my door? They're going to talk about Jesus? We see denominations that still do this. It isn't necessarily a bad thing. You can do visitation well today, but it's more likely that you're going to go to your neighbors and get to know every single one of them, knock on the door and, hey, I'm your neighbor. I don't know if you go to church, but I really belong to a great church. I would love for you to come, but if you ever have any faith needs or have any needs, I would love to be there and be a good neighbor to you. And begin to get to know everybody on the block. That is a more of a visitation strategy that would be conducive for evangelism today. The next one is liturgical. What do you mean by liturgical? I think of high church, right? You think of incense and smoke and Catholic churches, but there is this reality that people sometimes come to church and they don't believe. They belong before they believe. Our kids are like that. When they're growing up, they don't know Jesus. They're going to confess Jesus like 15 times by the time they're 15. So the reality for them is that by seeing baby dedications and us communicating that we are dedicating these kids to the Lord, and us as a congregation are committed to helping raise them in that way, they learn something about Jesus. It preaches the gospel. When we take communion and people begin to talk about the body and blood of Christ and it begins to connect, that preaches the gospel. When we baptize and someone declares, I have made a decision to follow Jesus. Even when we do weddings, where we invite God to be a participant in the married life. That is a way of talking about the good news of Jesus, and it is effective. We learn and belong before we believe. Moving forward, this is one that's going to hurt and smart for me and for many others, the church growth model. The church growth model is the one that I kind of have set up in this series to kind of preach against. It has engaged every tool possible in order to preach the gospel. It's done bait and switch even, where you like, come and get an iPad and then we're going to share about Jesus. And only those that come to the altar get to enter the raffle. And like that's been something that has been true for the church growth model in large churches for a long time. But at the heart of the church growth model is this. And I think it's still valid and true. It is, we want to create opportunities for people to experience Jesus. We don't want to bait and switch them. We want to provide a space where we can talk about the gospel, where people can enter. And so you see things like Upward would be part of that journey, where weekly we talk about Jesus and we're upfront in the beginning. We're authentic about it. We tell them we're going to talk about spiritual things, and if that's not for you, that's okay. But we are going to do it, and that's part of the program. We are going to encourage our coaches to be Christ-like, to not scream and yell at their kids. We're going to encourage them to be teaching character and morals throughout the game. And it's effective. It's effective to the point where, like, kids that used to spend all their time trash talking by the end of the season are encouragers to others. It's effective in that 30-some kids accept Jesus. It's effective to where parents are circling our church and looking at us and going, we really love our program. And the questions I always have is, how do you get that bridge into church? Some of those families are already going to church. They're thankful that we're providing that kind of space. Some of those families need Jesus and need the church. But that's going to be a job for all of us. It's an opportunity. Moving beyond the church growth model, being attractive or having the right music, there is the prophetic voice. Now, you might say the prophetic voice is the voice that gets up on the stool and begins to yell and scream judgment. But if you pay attention to the book of Isaiah where we started, the book of Isaiah, speaking to the people of God in the beginning, decries the people of God's sins. Then the people of God fall into the captivity that happens in Babylon, and many of them fall to the Assyrians. And there's a hopelessness there. I think many of the people we encounter have been calling for good news and finding themselves hopeless. And the prophetic voice says, I have come to pronounce the year of the Lord's favor. I have come to give freedom for the prisoner and safety, healing for the oppressed. I have come to bring good news to the poor. If you didn't know this, a prophetic understanding of evangelism might be living all of those pieces of a larger gospel out, enacting them in ways that are like us taking care packages to the homeless. And not looking at people as lesser than us or not belonging, but simply saying, we love you. The gospel is more than just forgiveness and brokenness that you are, but God has more for you. But for now, if this is all you need, here you go. Then you have the revival. The revival is very much a Nazarene and holiness movement tradition of the United States. It is we are going to put up a tent, we are going to get an evangelist, and we're going to spend 5-6 days just seeking God. That good news or that evangelism strategy does work, and it has worked. It's working less today than it used to. If you haven't paid attention, some of the things that are in this have shifted, not because the gospel has changed, but culture has changed, and the strategies have changed. Right now, relational ministry is the best way to do it. Small group might be the second best. The last one that we're going to talk about in a little bit, media might be part of it, social media and those types of things. But the revival, and why I love this, is because it's not just for non-church people. We should invite them. But revival is the same thing that the people in the book of Isaiah are going through. They were dead bones. And now hope is being spoken over them in life. How many of us, even as Christians, have forgot that we are still in need of the good news? That there is hope. When my finances are stressed and my kids are crazy and life is broken, that Jesus is still speaking life over me and that the way of Jesus has something for me. If you didn't know this, there's studies that have talked about how the gospel presented well into communities, going back all the way to the 1700s, has produced economic lift in communities. That when Jesus begins to take hold and coal miners begin to know Jesus, all of a sudden there's less money being spent at the bar, but these families are able to put together homes and lives and celebrate that Jesus is caring for them. Their whole identity has changed and their priorities have changed. And all of a sudden, Good news comes in their finances. Good news comes in their relationship with their wife and their kids. Good news comes in their ability to excel in work. Good news is more than just, you have been forgiven. And the final one that this modes of discipleship, and it's really updated because it's a biblical model that technology in some ways was used in order to help spread the gospel. Paul would write a letter. It would be sent. They would read it over the entire church. They would memorize every piece of it, and then they would pass it on to the next church. They would make copies and pass them around, and that spreading of the gospel. And even when we got to the point in like the 1600s when the Bible began to be printed for the first time in traditional languages, not just in Latin or in Greek, but in something that could be read by the general public, the understanding of the gospel grew. At every point in technology can be used for good or evil, but there is an opportunity, when done right, to say, there's a wide audience of people that we engage with on Facebook. And to not just give them the, I love Jesus, this is the day of the Lord, but to maybe even say something along what we've been talking about today. How great, how beautiful, how amazing are the feet of those who bring good news. And what do I mean by good news? I do mean forgiveness of sins. I do mean a new life and new identity, but I mean more. The good news is exactly that, good news for a reason. Okay, so you guys have just gotten like a full dose of a whole bunch of stuff today. So where do you go from here? My hope is that you have heard one of these and been like, I think that might be my mode. The book that kind of spurred on this series talks about every one of us has a temperature when it comes to being those who sell good, or who not sell good news, but are people who bring good news. That some of us live on the cold side, meaning we're not really talking about Jesus, we're not witnessing, it's not something we think about. And some people are on the extremely hot side. Like, you're buying groceries next to them and they're going to tell you about Jesus. The bank teller knows. Everybody in their life knows that they follow Jesus and can witness what God is doing in their life for themselves. Every one of us has a temperature. I would like to say that most of us exist somewhere in the middle, but we all know, and you could probably identify quickly, am I cold, warm, hot, tepid? My hope is that if we take seriously the imperative of all Christianity to go and make disciples, that you are the people that should be fitted with the readiness of the gospel on your feet. That you are the beautiful feet. I mean, some of you guys have some so-so feet, but spiritually, you are the beautiful feet. And your job is to bring good news to places that have not seen good news. Your job is to recognize that those people living in hope and that have had the same experience, that are just crying out for good news, might have an opportunity in you to hear that good news. We're going to pray in just a moment. And here's how I'd like to pray. So I'm going to invite you to think of three things. One, what is your spiritual temperature? And God, how does it need to change? God, is there a mode or a strategy that really fits me? Do I need to go knock on doors of all my neighbors and just say, hey, I'm your neighbor. I'd love to help you, be a part of your lives. I also love Jesus, and if you don't have a church, come on. Do I need to create a small group of those neighbors and friends? do I need to build relationships and have a person in mind that specifically I want to? So the three parts there, as you know, I ramble on. First, what's my temperature? God, what's my mode? What best fits my time, my abilities, and how might I engage it? And then finally, is there someone in my life that is on my heart that needs not just the good news of forgiveness, but of freedom, of hope? How can I share my story with them? And then pray for opportunities and listen. Ready? So, those three, what's my temperature, what's my mode, and what's my person, or who's my person? Ready? God, I thank you so much for everyone here this morning. Honestly, I am just overwhelmingly thankful that you gave your son, and that good news is not just part of the story, it is the story. God, when you created us, you said it is very good. You have been speaking good news over us and over people from the very beginning until today, and then you made it tangible in Jesus. I pray that you would be with me as I figure out what my temperature is. Maybe that comes from my discipleship, God. Maybe I haven't been drawing close to you, and so I'm really on the cold side. Or maybe, God, I have been emphatic and maybe done it in poor ways, but I've been really serious about sharing the good news. God, I also know that there are different ways and strategies and approaches, but there's a lot of ways in which people experience the gospel through me. Unintentionally, people experience the gospel in my actions and the things I put out in the world. They see me for who I am and my fruit. But God, I pray that you'd help me to find a mode that would help me express and witness and tell the story of how you have been a good God to me. And finally, God, there are names that weigh heavy in my mind and my heart. It could be a child or a grandchild. It could be a neighbor or a close friend. Could be somebody that's wounded by church so much that it's really hard for them to cross through the doors. But God, may you continually bring someone to my mind. May I listen to your Spirit as it prepares the road and as it prepares the ground for any gospel good news message that might come. May I be led by your Spirit. May I listen more than I speak. God, I thank you for who you are. Now I pray. Amen. Would you stand with me for a benediction? May God bless you and keep you, and may his face shine upon you. And may you be known as the people with beautiful feet.